My name is Cathy Katin-Grazzini. I have a business, Cathy's Kitchen Prescription, out of Ridgefield, Connecticut. I'm a plant-based cooking instructor and nutritional coach. So I do little classes, I do one-on-one counseling and cooking classes, telling people about the joys of cooking whole food, plant-based, with no added oils for their health effects. And as I was mentioning just a minute or two ago, that the health effects when you switch to a plant-based diet, some of which happen very, very quickly. Your blood sugars come down, and if you're on medication, you need to be monitored to make sure you're not lowering them below. You may have to adjust that medication. Oftentimes, people come off medications entirely over time. For diabetes, it's very successful. It affects cancer markers, as Ron was talking about. You know, that can happen over time for certain types of cancer in particular. Most of us in America, since childhood, with the standard American diet, have plaque in our arteries. And our arteries become stiffer and raises our blood pressure. All of these processes begin to reverse themselves remarkably. And the body has an incredible ability to heal itself. And so it's, and even atherosclerotic plaque will condense, and inflammation will, it's a very anti-inflammatory way of eating. So for a whole host of maladies, autoimmune diseases, allergies, you know, many, many different conditions, don't progress and many times begin to reverse if we're fortunate. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is a very simple recipe. It's an appetizer, a canapé, and it's, I wanted to keep it something that everybody can find these ingredients and make at home, and it's very tasty. And it will give you a little demonstration of what it's like to cook without cooking oils. Because when we first changed over to this way of eating, that was mind-bending. We lived for years in Italy, and so the idea of sautéing without oil was like, you know, completely confusing. But in effect, it's a very simple technique and there's no real magic to it. So what I have here is my little induction burner. I've been heating up my pan, so it's medium high. And I'm just, well, let me just tell you what my ingredients are. What we're doing today, I handed out the recipe is for batufoli di polenta con funghi. Now, we're not going to be doing, batufoli in Italian means cotton balls, little fluffy, you know, cotton-like balls. And that's one way of, with polenta, that you can serve polenta with a mushroom sauce on top. We are doing the second recipe on that list, which is the crostini. So what I did before I came here, just in the interest of time, is I made some, I'll walk you through the polenta part of it. Very, very simple to work with polenta. And we will be heating up the little crostini that I prepared at home that will serve as a cracker for the topping of mushrooms that we'll be cooking up right now. So here I just have a red onion, minced garlic, fresh thyme, and I happen to have some Chinese chive, which with just something from an Asian market, which is very nice. It's like a cross between scallions and garlic that you can find in Asian markets. Some slivers of a good quality canned tomato. Bella Terra is my tomato du jour because it's a lovely organic tomato from San Marzano, Italy, and it has no preservatives and other ingredients in it. It works very well. Some cooking broth if we need it. And I have a mixture of minced mushrooms that I did at home, and any mushrooms will do. The mushrooms are extraordinary. They have qualities that are anti-inflammatory, and they also enhance our immune system. So in here we have crimini mushrooms, we have king oyster mushrooms. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're quite large. Again, you can find those in Asian markets, but any kind of medley of mushrooms that you find. I have shiitake, and the little teeny, I don't know if you've ever seen enoki mushrooms also that are available. They're like lily lollipops, you know, just on a very skinny stem. Salt and pepper, and I have my little secret ingredient are dried porcini. Porcini, the king of mushrooms, is the most aromatic, and morels are lovely too. And if one goes hunting, this is the season for collecting morels. But porcini you can buy dried, and if you have a little coffee grinder or spice grinder, you can make your own powder, your own seasoning. And we're going to use this just to enhance the mushroom flavor, to really bring it out as we go. So to start, we have on a stainless pan, we have a medium-high heat. I'm just going to throw in my onions, just all by themselves. And with a little pinch of salt, and we don't use much salt in this cuisine, just enough for flavor, but a little pinch here will help the onions release their moisture. And the reason we're starting with onions is we're gonna caramelize them. It will just be a nice foundational flavor. And it's great in any kind of saute when you're making a soup or a chili or, just about, a sauce of any sort. To start with an aromatic like onion or shallot in the plant-based world is a wonderful foundational flavor that we're gonna just let it cook up, and it will begin to release its own moisture and then begin to brown a little bit. This will just take a couple of minutes. I think I can even go a little higher. So while that's cooking up, let me try to, everything in what we're having tonight is full of antioxidants and phytonutrients, which really is protective of the DNA in our cells, and the mitochondria. The mushrooms have beneficial effects even in the mitochondria, the little engines within every cell. So it's the corn in the polenta is full of fiber. There's also fiber in absolutely all these vegetables, all our fruits, whole grains, beans. These are the foundational foods in the plant-based world. And mushrooms, because they are actually not part of the plant kingdom, but very, very beneficial when it comes to its health effects, and they're delicious. So the onions are beginning to just soften up a little bit. This is where we edit and move ahead. But I'm just waiting for them to crisp up a little teeny bit before I start adding other ingredients. Anybody have any questions while we're going? Nope? Okay. Well, we're getting some. The mushrooms actually, this is the foundation for even traditional cuisines the world over. If we were in France or Italy, we'd be making a mirepoix, where you'd start with onions and carrots and celery, and that's kind of the foundation in the French kitchen and in the Italian as well. If we were in Spain, we'd be adding peppers to that mixture, and that would be the underlying beginning for most of their dishes. If we were cooking with carrots, I would throw them in right now because they also have a high water content and they would caramelize, and that's another wonderful flavor to, but it's not appropriate for mushrooms particularly. Okay, I think nothing is sticking here. No oil, no sticking. Just not an issue. You know, as long as you're stirring, yeah.
That's the biggest problem I find without the oil.
Sticking?
I have a short pan and making the garlic or onions or whatnot, crisping them up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. It's okay if you get a little browning in the bottom of your pan, which is what's happening here. Nothing is really sticking, but there is a little bit of browning. And what you would do is we're going to add the garlic in a minute, but the garlic tends to burn if you put it in a, you don't want to leave garlic too soon before you add some liquid. So, but you want to keep the onions just are taking a little time, but they are softening up here and they're beginning to crisp up. But when you deglaze a pan, which we are going to do, then all that crispiness is actually fine, and it will all come up. And so that's actually building flavor into your dish. So at this moment, I'm going to add in the garlic, the chives, and the thyme. And I'm just going to cook it for another minute. And then sometimes, because there is a little adhesion to the bottom of the pan, I will deglaze it. You can use vermouth, you can use white wine, you can use any liquid you like. I happen to have just a little veggie broth, which I make every time we eat so many greens that anytime we're steaming our kale or collards or bok choy or whatever, just save the liquid at the bottom of the pan, and we recycle it as a cooking liquid. You don't have to go out and buy broth necessarily.
How long is that in?
This, a week or two. I've never had it go bad. I mean, it's probably lasts even longer. So Ron, I'm just adding a little bit of liquid. You know, one mistake that people often make when they're not cooking with oil is they substitute liquid for olive oil. So initially, if you were cooking with oil, you would add oil at the very get-go, and they would just add broth in the very get-go. But you want a little caramelization with onions, for example, for flavor. And so everything doesn't become soft and mushy. So that has lifted up all of the caramelized onions at the bottom that were beginning to adhere. I'm going to put in now see if we are going to use all of these. This is a lot of mushrooms. Probably don't even need all of them. And I'm going to lower the heat a little bit. I don't want to lower it too much, but because the mushrooms also have a very high water content, and so they will release their liquid now as well. How much porcini powder? As much as you like. We'll add a nice little bit because it's just so wonderfully. Here, why don't we pass this around so that you can smell the beauty of porcini, the king of mushrooms. Of course, I'm a little biased from Italy, I suppose. Strong. Yeah. It's that umami flavor that mushrooms have, you know, but from a taste perspective. Pepper, just fresh black pepper. And I'm just going to add a little more salt at this point, just sea salt. I generally use iodized sea salt because we're not getting iodine through, unless you're eating a lot of seaweed, then you definitely, you know, kelp is very high in iodine, almost too high. But if you're not cooking with sea vegetables, then it's good to get a trace amounts one way or another, and salt is one way to do it. And then, now this is optional. You know, I have it in this recipe, but it's not essential. But I think it's nice from a nutritional perspective, but also for color, because cooking, we eat with our eyes first and foremost. So everything we cook, we want to be beautiful and appealing. And these are just slivered canned tomatoes from the, you know, whatever tomato you favor. Just to point, we're still we're still softening up. The mushrooms haven't quite gotten there yet, but I will tip going forward so that you all can see. I think I'll use all of these tomatoes. So while this is cooking, let me tell you a little bit about the polenta. There are a lot of brands of polenta. It's cornmeal, you know, and they come in different grades of grit, how coarse or how fine, and it's a matter of personal taste. When we used to live in Italy, the polenta that was available there, you needed to stir and cook it for, geez, a half an hour. I mean, it was laborious, but delicious. But the brands available here, I cook in minutes. So even though they don't say they're pre-cooked, there must be something in their process that cuts off time. So the brand that I like the flavor of is Bob's Mills. You probably are familiar with that. They make all, extensively. It's in the supermarkets and easy to find. It's a little coarser. It's a little more rustic. But you get a nice corny taste. Just gonna help it release it a little more liquid here. Here we are. So a little more cooking. So I'll walk you through. The reason I didn't make the polenta as well is that for the crostini, it would have taken hours. We are a little limited with what we can do for time, not because it takes hours to cook, but it has to cool, and then once it's totally cooled, you cut it and then toast it. And so that whole process, you have to give time for things to congeal and cook. But it's a little bit like making oatmeal, very, very simple. You simply boil water, put a little bit of salt in if you're using a teeny bit of salt, and omit it if you have high blood pressure. You can certainly reduce that down to nil. And then you add the polenta and you stir. And within 5 minutes, at least with Bob Mills. So this is one of our slices of polenta. After we poured them on in our container or on a board and it's cooled and solidified, you simply slice it up. I use this pan to brown them. It takes a little bit of time till, they begin to crisp up, so you can keep an eye on it, but you don't have to be that attentive. And I'm just going to put them back up a little bit hotter than this, I think, because we're not that hot yet. Just to warm through, and then we'll serve them all to you, and you get to taste. Has anybody gone mushroom hunting? Anybody ever done that in their lives? I'm dying to do that.
With my grandparents.
Did you really?
Yeah. And I don't know how I'm still living.
Well, they must have known what they were doing.
I guess so.
Where were they from? Were they born here or
No, Barry.
in Bari?
Yeah.
In Italy.
Yeah.
Well, the Italians love to go mushroom hunting. So this is true. When Giordano's parents would come and visit us, that we once went to Storm King. Have any of you been to the sculpture gardens across the Hudson? And while we were looking at all the sculptures, they were noticing all the prataioli growing in the fields, and we spent all our time mushroom hunting. Forget about the sculptures. So that was their love. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know what mushrooms, obviously. And but there are clubs.
Yeah, there is a local group.
Is there a Westchester group? I wonder if there's one. That's fantastic. I might have to check that out, because this is a great time of the year for morels, they tell us.
Is the polenta something that you can cook in batches, slice and freeze?
Yes, indeed.
And it
Yes.
warms up
And
and
if-
just like toast it or put it in a pan?
Yep. You can now I wouldn't microwave them because it won't be crispy, but if you put them in like a toaster oven for a couple of minutes,
Like you would toast and just...
or put them on the toast setting. And you can certainly heat them out that way instead of this way. I've tried broiling these, on a low broil, and they will crisp up, but not as uniformly. You'll get dark spots and then white spots. And, I just thought this was a little more gentle, a little more, you get an overall browning, which I like the look of it. But if you don't have the time, try it on a low a low setting on the broiler or a toaster, you know, if you have a toaster oven.
And how thick did you slice them?
These are about 1/4 of an inch. And again, it's a matter of taste, you know. They to get a little brown, they have to dry out the exterior. When you slice it with it's like cutting a cake. You would keep a container of water with the knife, because you'll need to keep cleaning. It's rather sticky and gummy when it's congealed but not yet toasted. And this kind of makes a little skin on the exterior, which is pleasant, little crunchy, croccante. I mean, we're already in spring, and although mushrooms are year-round, but polenta I usually think of as a fall dish or a winter dish, because it's a stick-to-your-ribs sort of thing. There's a lot of fiber in mushrooms and a lot of fiber in the corn, and this is whole corn. So you're getting the advantages of fiber. It fills you up. It's great for our microbiome, those gut bacteria in our large intestine that does all sorts of good things for us, you know. 9 out of 10 cells in our body are not human. They're microbial. And this is a whole new field of science, and there's a lot of research going on. It's very interesting, it's fascinating. It affects our brain function, our digestion, I mean, all effects throughout the body, very beneficial. And we need to feed them and keep them happy. And a plant-based diet does that.
Have you ever tried the polenta that comes
In-
already in the tubes?
Yes, not very good.
Not very good, okay.
Yeah.
Trader Joe's, they have.
I know. I don't see the point. You know, it takes minutes to make polenta here. So it's so much better. They have a strange texture. They're very uniform. You don't get any kind of nutty flavor.
You said they're very high in sodium.
Oh, well, there you go. You know, another thing. You know, as you saw, we used very little, you know, just enough to bring out the flavor. There's no reason to over salt any of these, which is so damaging for your blood vessels. So you really want to minimize the salt. And the tomato is just visually nice. It has lycopene, which is a wonderful antioxidant and very beneficial, like everything in the plants, you know, kingdom. And there's so much that we still don't know in terms of the composition of all these beneficial nutrients and micronutrients in plant-based foods, and they seem to work in concert. That's one thing they do sort of believe, is that that the sum is greater than the parts. So when you eat a variety of these foods, you're getting the positive effects boosted of all the nutrients in all these different ingredients. This is just a little garnish of, I don't want to put too much on, but very pretty with the green color, and a little bit of, these are just the Chinese chives and a little bit of thyme. So I'm going to pass this one out, and I'll put up the other platter. Sorry. Let me, if I had a napkin there. There you go.